Over the last decade, on and off, we've had the opportunity to share hundreds of stories with you. Along the way, we picked up a loyal following, and a few lifelong haters too, which, let's be honest, is the best proof we're doing something right. We've pissed off people before, and judging by tonight's topic, we're probably about to do it again. We're not here for comfort zones, sugarcoating stories, or playing nice with others. Everything you're about to hear, of course, is allegedly drawn from our own investigations, interviews, and the accounts of one woman who refused to accept the story she was given and decided to find the truth herself. As always, we're not here to tell you what to believe. We're here to make you think, to get you talking, to make you ask questions. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll have plenty. Because what started off as a search for answers took a turn that none of us saw coming. One that went far deeper than what any of us expected. If anything happens to me, it's not by my hand, it'll be by Gary. These chilling words crackled over a recorded phone call a few summers back. The trembling voice of 54-year-old Kenneth Michael Massey can be heard on the other end of it. At the time, Ken was scared and distraught, implying that his one-time friend Gary would try to kill him. Was this paranoia, or a real threat he sensed closing in? That question would haunt everyone trying to understand what came next.
Where is he?
Ken was a 54-year-old man from Douglasville, Georgia. He was a loving father and a friend to many. He was struggling with personal hardships in the years leading up to 2025. He had lost his wife not long before. A devastating loss has sent him into a tailspin of grief and depression. On top of that, Kenneth was being evicted from his longtime home on Terry Lane, a shadow that loomed over his final days. The landlord noted that he had been lenient with the eviction, given Kenneth's situation and emotional state. Friends knew Kenneth was struggling. Sheriff deputies even were familiar with his address from calls in the past. It was as if everyone saw tragedy coming. What no one expected was the dark twist this tragedy would take. January 29th, 2025. For several days, no one had heard from Ken. That's when his friend Brenda Bridges grew concerned. Knowing that there was an eviction on the way, she contacted the landlord and asked for permission to go to the property with her friend to check on Ken. That afternoon around 1 p.m., Brenda and a friend unlocked the back door of 2135 Terry Lane with a key she said she found in Ken's truck. The house was quiet. As they moved down the hallway, Brenda stumbled upon a gut-wrenching sight. Ken's body, lifeless, laying on the floor. Brenda's scream of his name was met with only silence. Brenda and her friend were so shocked that they fled the house and alerted Ken's landlord, Winton Moreland, instead of calling 911 directly. By the time the sheriffs had arrived, the scene was treated as an unintended death with an assumed suicide narrative. Deputy Ronnie Sellers, one of the first on the scene, noted that he was familiar with the residents from a previous call for a welfare check.
Yeah, he hung himself. Yeah, cord wrapped around his head.
In other words, before any real investigation had started, officials were already inclined to see Ken's death through the lens of his past struggles. First responders noted that signs showed he could have been dead for at least 4 or 5 days, if not longer. A green electrical cord hung from the attic hatch, snapped in half, with the other end loosely knotted around Ken's neck. Beneath him, a pool of blood had formed under his head and traced down his shoulder. His body was wedged in a fetal position against the hallway wall, a short stepladder standing nearby.
And this one sounds like it might be a little bit more. Yeah. Because he used to have a classic green car outside.
It's gone.
Yeah, it's gone. So I don't know if he gave that away or if it just got stolen.
Yeah, he's green.
Yeah.
Even in those first moments, the scene didn't make sense. The house seemed off. Things seemed to be missing, and there was so much blood. And why had Kenneth parked his golden Pontiac as if he didn't want it to be seen? Why was there a power cord and a heater running to the vehicle? And Why were the windows covered with towels? Most unsettling of all, why did the inside of the car reek of death? It's parked right down the road, investigators, if you want to go check it out yourselves. And then there was the cord, the supposed noose that ended his life. Investigators noted that part of it still hung loosely around his neck, a knot holding it in place. The other end dangled from the attic entry above, tied to a metal bar wedged between two pieces of sheetrock smeared with handprints. On paper, it looks simple. Ken climbed the ladder, he took the cord, and he tied it through the rafters right around this pole right here. And then he stepped off into oblivion. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office quickly noted no signs of foul play, no struggle, no defensive wounds, no note, and they treated the death like an apparent suicide. They called in Deputy Coroner Keelan Neal and waited. Neal arrived around 3:25 p.m. that afternoon, yet strangely, he later recorded Ken's official time of death at 3:15 p.m., a full 10 minutes before he even arrived. A small discrepancy, perhaps, but it was just the first sign of the circus to come. That same evening, Neal consulted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation by phone. No autopsy was ordered. GBI medical examiner Dr. Samantha Maddox was briefed at 5:30 p.m. and based solely on verbal information, not photographs or first-hand observation, she determined that an autopsy was not necessary. The body was released to the coroner's custody and officials began notifying Kenneth's family that night. Investigator Martin later noted in his final report that he found no reason to believe that there was any foul play, marking the case closed and resolved. And just like that, in the eyes of the sheriff's office and the coroner's office, the story of Kenneth Massey was over. For them, it was an open-shut case, but the mystery surrounding Ken's death was just the beginning of something much, much larger. And for Ken's family, it was the start for a fight to uncover the truth. Enter Stephanie Llewellyn, Ken's first wife and the mother of both of his children, and still a longtime friend to him many years after they had separated. The news devastated his family and friends. How could this have happened? Yes, Ken was struggling. He was grieving the recent loss of his wife and the eviction of his home. But the idea of him taking his own life, it didn't sit well with those closest to him. As shock gave way to skepticism, Steph stepped forward to seek the truth. Both children formally signed over next of kin rights to Stephanie, empowering her to act on the family's behalf to investigate to see what really happened and seek the answers. She would go on to make a discovery so big that she would be sounding the alarms to state regulators that an even darker possibility was beginning to take shape. One that would turn the notion of suicide on its head. Stephanie and the kids immediately noticed something strange when they gained access to Ken's house after he died. The place looked ransacked. Almost all of Ken's personal belongings were gone. Furniture was emptied, valuable items missing, only trash and a few inexpensive things remained behind. This was not how Ken would have left his house. He had been in the process of being evicted, but the landlord confirmed he never removed anything from the property. So who cleared out the home? As they searched the nearly empty home, the family uncovered a chilling clue that would change everything. This would also be the first time that Gary's name would come into play. That's when Steph would remember a recording from Ken a few summers back, warning that Gary would be the man that took his life. Now, suddenly, the suicide narrative seemed even more questionable. Authorities never even considered foul play. Hell, they hadn't even thought to look. But what if? Rewinding the week before Kenneth's body was found, we enter a void of officially unexplored time. His final days remain a mystery, one investigators never truly tried to solve. Yet, when we piece together the available clues, a chilling picture of that week begins to emerge. On the afternoon of January 29, 2025, Ken was found face down in the hallway of his home, already in a state of decomposition. Draped over the back of his neck was a green nylon extension cord. Under any real investigation, that cord would have been the first piece of evidence bagged, photographed, and analyzed. Instead, Steph later tested that exact cord herself. A truck could barely snap it, but we're supposed to believe Kenneth's 190-pound frame somehow did. And still, the investigators on scene never removed it, never logged it, never preserved it. They left it right where it was. Even worse, the cord stayed there all the way to the crematorium. Had protocol been followed, crime scene techs would have bagged that cord immediately to check for DNA, fingerprints, fibers, and anything. But they didn't. Ken was cremated with the cord still around his neck. and whatever evidence it held was incinerated with him. We'll get more into that part later. Then there was the blood. Ken's body was covered in it. Lots of it. The body was in such bad shape that the funeral home would only let the family identify Ken using his tattoo. Yet officers on scene treated his death as a routine, unintended case, rather than a possible homicide. A proper investigation would have flagged a glaring detail. There was far more blood on Ken than in the surrounding area, suggesting he could have been injured elsewhere and moved, or that a struggle had occurred. Yet no blood splatter analysis or luminol testing took place. Worse, no coroner's photographs to document the blood patterns, the bruising, or even the body's position exist according to internal records. This is why the GBI only received word of mouth. Months later, the coroner's office admitted that they no longer had any of the death scene photos. Whether they were lost or never taken, we are not really sure, but that failure crippled any chance of accurately reconstructing the scene. Had standard procedures been followed, investigators would have taken dozens of high-resolution images that could have revealed crucial clues about the timing and cause of Ken's death. Evidence that is gone forever, and again, we'll get to that part later. The only photos that remain are the few taken by the sheriff's office, and even those raise some serious questions. Take the blood patterns, for example. If the cord snapped and Ken fell, a few droplets hitting the wall would make sense. But look closer at this blood transfer here. I've watched enough Dexter to know something's off. Notice how the blood pulls to the right, and explain how that much blood ends up smeared on a cracked door, yet the door frame right beside it remains untouched. Maybe, and just follow this line of thought for a moment, maybe the door was open, and Kenneth's body brushed up against it as it was being moved, and then they closed the door behind them. If investigators had considered the possibility of foul play, they might have looked at the scene through a different lens. They might have documented the missing items. They might have noticed the open window in the back of the house. And they might have taken a closer look at the vehicle hidden in the back of the property with a heater running to it. And they might have noticed that it reeked of death, as if a body had been stored inside and kept warm. With this new perspective, the investigators' next logical step would have been talking to Ken's neighbors. And that alone would have blown the story wide open. Because Ken's neighbor, Cameron Osborne, remembered something very specific about January 23rd, 6 days before the body was found. There was unusual activity at Ken's house that immediately caught his eye. You see, Ken loved his trucks. He had two old-school Dodgers, a 1980 white Dodge pickup, the one that everyone called the General Lee, and a 1986 white Dodge D150 with its original engine. Cameron knew how much Ken loved those trucks, so imagine his surprise when he saw one of those trucks being hauled off the property by a man named Samuel Kilgore. Sam didn't get far, though. The truck broke down halfway in the road, and Cameron actually stopped to help push it off to the side. But something felt off, so Cameron asked the obvious, "Where's Ken?" Sam's answer? Ken was inside the house laying down asleep. That answer didn't sit right with Cameron. In the middle of the afternoon? Why would Ken be napping while someone drives off with his truck? It made no sense. Cameron didn't push the issue right then, but that moment would later take on a whole new weight. You see, what he didn't realize is that Sam Kilgore wasn't the only one at Ken's house that day. According to accounts pieced together later, there were 3 other individuals at Ken's house on the 23rd. One was Mike Ellis, which was Sam Kilgore's cousin. The other 2, Brenda Bridges and her friend. Yes, that Brenda Bridges and her friend that would later discover Ken's body 6 days later. And that friend of hers, well, that would turn out to be none other than her husband, Gary Bridges. And what were they doing at Ken's home? The implication is disturbing. It appears they may have been removing Ken's vehicles and belongings nearly a week before he was found dead. I'm sorry, a week before they found him dead. In the days before Kenneth was found, there was no signs of a man preparing to die. No farewell text, no sudden withdrawal, no suicide notes in his unmistakable handwriting. Instead, there was movement, people in and out of his life, and phone calls that raised eyebrows. To dig deeper, we spoke with someone close to these events, Jamie Williams, who was Sam Kilgore's girlfriend at the time. Jamie's first-hand account provides perhaps the clearest picture of Ken's final hours. She remembers Sam coming home on January 23rd, excited about a deal he just made with Gary. Gary had offered him an insane deal. Help me get one of Ken's trucks running, and you can keep the other." Sam was eager. He even invited his cousin, Mike Ellis, to come along. Mike later told Jamie he didn't want to get involved in whatever Gary and Sam were planning, a sign that he sensed trouble. According to Jamie, Sam and the others succeeded in getting one of the trucks, the white Dodge General Lee, running and out of Ken's yard that day. Later that evening, Sam tried to convince Jamie to go back to Ken's house with him. Why? Sam told her that there was another vehicle on the property, a black Nissan Pathfinder that he could take, and there were other items inside Ken's house she might like. All they had to do, Sam said, was clean up the place for Ken. Jamie was immediately uneasy. Clean up the place. It sounded like Ken wasn't going to be there to claim his own things. Unnerved, Jamie refused to go. In the end, Sam never returned that night to retrieve the Pathfinder or any other items. We asked Jamie if she believed that her ex, Sam Kilgore, could have been involved with harming Ken. Her answer was chilling. She said the only side of Sam that she's ever known was anger. She even confided with us that she suspected Sam played a role in her own father's unexplained death, though she had been too afraid to voice it until now. In Jamie's view, Sam was fully capable of violence. Even though Sam didn't go back, this didn't stop Gary and Brenda. In the days after the 23rd, when no one could reach Ken, allegedly, Brenda and Gary repeatedly went back to Ken's property and cleared it out. They removed personal belongings, vehicles, anything of value. By the time Ken's family entered the house, virtually everything was gone. It was as if Ken's life had been packed up and stolen before anyone even knew he was dead. Now, this is good to know because it explains so much about Ken's utility usage. You see, we broke down Ken's power bill by weekly usage, and what we found just didn't add up. If you take a look here, on the 17th and 18th, we know that Ken wasn't home. That's why it reflects those low numbers. Now, one would think, leading up to the 29th, you would see those same type of numbers. But if you take a look at the week after the 23rd, when we know that people were at Ken's house, we don't see a drop-off until the 27th, just a couple of days before Ken's body was discovered. What's even crazier, on the 24th and the 25th, the power trips. It cuts off for hours, and somehow it gets cut back on. Something tells me that Ken wasn't the one that turned that power back on. And honestly, something tells me, I'm not an energy specialist, but something tells me that's not the electrical usage of a dead man. Now, this is where we start going down the rabbit hole. Brenda, who had never met Stephanie before, would end up reaching out to her and telling her that she was worried about Ken and hadn't seen him in weeks. Yet practically in the same breath would tell her that she had 3 large totes of items and an envelope to give to Steph in case something happened to Ken. Now, Steph thought this was pretty weird, wanted to know why Brenda had Ken's belongings as she had not truly seen him in weeks, but still agreed to meet with her the following weekend for the handoff. Less than 24 hours later, on the 29th, Ken's body was discovered, and this envelope would play a huge part in what's to come. When Steph got the call from her daughter, she immediately texted Brenda. In the message, she explained that the police had just contacted her daughter. Brenda replied, "Yeah, I know." She went on to say that she had just found out herself, and Ken had been dead for a week, and that it was suicide. What she failed to mention was a crucial detail. She was the one who discovered the body, and instead of calling 911, she contacted the landlord. In a recorded phone conversation later, Brenda would stumble over even the easiest questions when pressed by Steph. When asked why her and Gary hadn't called 911 when they discovered the body, Brenda would say that Gary had outstanding warrants and wanted to leave before the police arrived. So instead, they contacted the landlord to let him take care of the matter. Stephanie then asked about the white Dodge trucks missing from the property, especially the General Lee. Brenda replied that Kenneth had sold both of his trucks but claimed she didn't know to who. When questioned about Kenneth's phone and belongings, she insisted she didn't have the phone and said that Kenneth had sold everything he owned right before taking his own life. She then goes on to claim that Ken had been acting strange and talking about hurting himself, but she didn't actually think he would go through with it. When asked about the last time they had seen Ken, she admits that Ken had actually stayed with both her and Gary shortly before all this had happened. When talking with Gary, Gary said that Ken's decline was foreseeable and that he had been talking crazy for a while. And about a week before Ken's body was found, he had called Gary and tried to give Gary all of his belongings, including 2 white trucks. You know, the 2 white trucks, Brenda had no idea where they went. When asked about January 28th and 29th specifically, Gary's accounts are a little bit different than Brenda's. He states that on the 28th, he and Brenda went to Ken's house to check on him, with the landlord's permission, but nobody was home. On the 29th, Gary claims they returned after calling the landlord for permission to enter since they still hadn't heard from Ken. This time, Gary says he noticed a strong odor and grew concerned. He allegedly searched Ken's Nissan Pathfinder parked outside and found a set of house keys there. Using those, he entered through the carport, not the back door Brenda had mentioned earlier. Gary says he walked inside and immediately saw Kenneth's lifeless body on the hallway floor. He shouted for Brenda, who came in, saw the horrific scene, and ran out, distraught. Gary claims they left immediately, and he was the one who called the landlord to report the discovery. Brenda, in contrast, never admitted to Stephanie that she was even there on the 29th. She implied she just found out later that Ken was dead. As Steph continued her investigation, Brenda would eventually hand over the envelope that Ken had supposedly entrusted to her in case something happened to him. Now, Brenda stated inside the envelope it contained vehicle titles, some keys, and some personal notes. When Steph looked at the envelope, her blood turned cold. You see, scrawled on the back, across the back of the envelope was a message that read like a suicide note, full of sorrow and apology. The problem is that it wasn't in Ken's handwriting at all. Remember that chilling clue they found while cleaning out Ken's place? The one that cracked everything open? Stephanie discovered a crumpled up letter in a garbage can. Shockingly, it started almost word for word like the suicide note written on the envelope, as if someone had been practicing, drafting, and rewriting Ken's final message. And just like the note, the handwriting wasn't Ken's. Instead, the style and certain letters looked eerily familiar, almost identical to the handwriting on a bill of sale Brenda later produced for one of Ken's trucks. A bill of sale that was proven to be forged, because Ken never really sold that truck to anyone. Put together, the implications were explosive. The suicide note wasn't just suspicious, it appeared to be manufactured, likely by Brenda or someone working with her, designed to sell the idea that Ken killed himself and to cover up the theft of his vehicles and belongings. By now, Stephanie had compiled a troubling picture. Ken's closest friends stood to gain by his death. They had taken his truck and belongings. They were the last to see him alive and the first to find him dead. And in the aftermath, they fled. Authorities never even talked to them. And to make things worse, you have possibly staged evidence, all while key evidence was either lost or destroyed. As for Kenneth's belongings, well, with the help of Gary's own cousin, Seal's fellow Bridges, and Stephanie's friend Shane Pierce, she was able to track down not only both of Ken's trucks, but nearly every stolen item from his home, including his phone. Samuel had taken the General Lee, Kenneth's 1980 Dodge D150 to B&D, where he had it scrapped after people started asking questions. Strangely, the vehicle was processed without a title or even a photo ID. According to Jamie, Samuel had previously worked there, and it appeared the staff knew him, likely why they waived the standard legal requirements normally needed to dispose of a vehicle, even a stolen one. The other truck, the one Gary took, was hauled to Myers to be scrapped as well. Luckily, Stephanie intervened just in time, recovering the vehicle before it was destroyed, though Myers still forced her to buy it back. Disturbingly, both scrapyards showed zero concern about the shady circumstances, asking no questions and requiring no documentation. According to Fellow, Gary openly bragged about the items he stole from Kenneth's home, claiming he had stashed them in a storage unit in Wedowee, Alabama. The following week, Stephanie and several others drove down and confronted Gary at that unit and forced him to open it. Inside was almost everything taken from Ken's property. From that moment on, Stephanie became a target. Gary began threatening her repeatedly. Rumors and accusations swirled, and everyone close to Ken began to realize nothing about the case added up. Gary's behavior only made the red flags brighter. Then came another chilling twist. Shane Pierce, the friend who'd helped Stephanie recover Ken's belongings, died under mysterious circumstances on Mother's Day. His mother reported seeing one of his friends, Blake Keener, rushing out of the house moments before she found Shane's body on the basement floor. Keener, notably, is tied directly into Gary Bridges' circle. If you're already thinking that this story demands justice, or at least the case should be reopened, well, you're not alone. Ken's family feels the same way. But here's the crazy part. As tangled and as disturbing as this case is, it's only chapter 1. What comes next peels back an even darker layer, one that stretches far beyond the crime scene. You see, the investigation didn't end when Ken's body was discovered. It followed it into the very institutions meant to protect his dignity and preserve the truth, the funeral home and the coroner's office. And behind those closed doors, that's where the story shifts from suspicious to downright alarming. Evidence mishandled, procedures ignored, the records that just don't line up, and a chain of decisions so reckless it makes you question, was this incompetence or a cover-up? And the deeper we dug into the Douglas County Coroner's Office, the more obvious it became that something was very, very wrong. Nothing added up. Nothing felt accidental. That's when we realized the next person to expose wasn't a suspect at the crime scene. It was you, Coroner Renee Godwin.